What if the mess in your home isn't actually a cleaning problem? It might sound strange at first, but stay with me for a moment. Most of us assume that if our homes feel cluttered, the answer is simple: we just need to clean more. So we spend our weekends wiping counters, folding laundry, putting things back where they belong, only to find ourselves doing the exact same thing a few days later. But what if the real problem didn't start with the dirty dishes in your sink or the pile of clothes on that chair? What if it started much earlier? Picture this. You get home after a long day at work. You kick off your shoes by the door. Your keys land on the kitchen counter. Your bag ends up on a dining chair. Today's mail gets tossed on top of yesterday's unopened envelopes. You tell yourself you'll deal with it after dinner. None of those little moments seem like a big deal. In fact, each one takes only a few seconds. But together, they've already created something your brain has to carry. Not just physical clutter, but unfinished decisions. Every item you've left behind is quietly asking for your attention. Put me away. Sort me later. Don't forget about me. By the time you finally sit down to relax, your home isn't just full of things. It's full of tiny promises you've made to yourself but haven't kept yet. That's why clutter feels so exhausting. It's not only taking up space, it's taking up mental space. This is where the Japanese approach is so different. Instead of asking, "How can I clean faster?" it asks a much more interesting question. How can I stop the mess from happening in the first place? The cleanest homes in Japan aren't usually the ones where people spend hours cleaning every day. They're the ones built around small, almost invisible systems that quietly prevent clutter before it ever has a chance to grow. And that's exactly what we're exploring today. Not cleaning hacks, not miracle organizing products, but 15 simple Japanese habits that make a home feel calmer, lighter, and easier to take care of almost without thinking. Stop clutter before it enters. The biggest mistake most people make is thinking clutter begins when the house already looks messy. It doesn't. Clutter starts much earlier, usually in moments so small we barely notice them. A purchase that seemed like a good deal, a gift we feel guilty throwing away, a jacket tossed over a chair because we'll wear it again tomorrow. One small decision rarely changes a home, but hundreds of small decisions, repeated over weeks and months, quietly shape the way we live. One of the most fascinating things about many Japanese homes is that they aren't built around cleaning harder. They're built around preventing clutter before it has the chance to grow. Instead of constantly asking, "How do I clean this?" they ask, "How do I stop this from becoming a problem in the first place?" That shift in thinking changes everything. Let's look at 4 simple habits that do exactly that. 1. One in, one out. Clutter rarely arrives all at once. It sneaks in one coffee mug, one souvenir, one online order, one "it was on sale" purchase at a time. Most people don't notice anything has changed until one day the shelves are full and the closet door won't close anymore. Many Japanese households follow a remarkably simple rule. Whenever something new comes into the home, something old leaves. A new sweater replaces an old one. A new bowl replaces one you no longer use. The total number of belongings stays surprisingly consistent over time. At first, this might sound restrictive, but it actually creates something most people are looking for without realizing it. Breathing room. Because every object you own asks something from you long after you've paid for it. It asks for a place to live. It asks to be cleaned. It asks to be maintained. It asks to be remembered. And someday, it asks you to decide what to do with it. In other words, every possession comes with a hidden cost, not just money, attention. The fewer unnecessary decisions your home asks you to make every day, the calmer it begins to feel. Sometimes the easiest way to organize your home is simply to stop making it bigger. 2. The uncertainty box. Now let's talk about one of the hardest parts of decluttering. It's usually not throwing things away, it's deciding. We've all had those items: the extra phone charger, a sweater you haven't worn in 2 years, a kitchen gadget you might use someday. You don't love it. You don't need it today, but getting rid of it somehow feels uncomfortable. Many Japanese households solve this with a simple system. Anything you're unsure about goes into a labeled box with today's date written on it. Then you leave it alone. If 30 days go by and you never once think about the item or reach for it, the decision has already been made. It leaves the house. Why does this work so well? Because time quietly removes emotion. Psychologists often talk about decision fatigue, the mental exhaustion that comes from making too many choices. When we're tired, even small decisions begin to feel surprisingly difficult. The box removes that pressure. Instead of forcing yourself to decide today, you allow time to reveal what truly matters. Very often, what we think we're holding on to isn't the object itself. It's the possibility that we might need it one day. And those are two very different things. 3. Keep a donation bag ready. Most people declutter the same way. They wait until the garage feels overwhelming or the closet won't close, and then they dedicate an entire Saturday to cleaning. The problem is that clutter has already won. Many Japanese households take a much quieter approach. They keep one donation bag tucked away in a closet all year long. Whenever something no longer serves a purpose, it goes directly into the bag. No debate, no scheduling a future cleanup. Just one small decision made in the moment. Eventually, when the bag is full, it leaves the house. That last step is important because an item isn't really gone the moment you place it in the donation bag. It's only gone when the donation bag leaves your home. Otherwise, you've simply moved the clutter from one corner to another. The goal isn't to organize unwanted things. The goal is to let them continue someone else's story instead of taking up space in yours. Small habits like this prevent clutter from ever becoming a mountain in the first place. 4. The entryway. The home's first filter. There's one place in almost every home where clutter likes to gather first: the entryway. Shoes, bags, keys, mail, packages, everything seems to stop there. In Japan, this space is called the Genkan, and it's much more than a place to take off your shoes. It's a boundary, a quiet transition between the outside world and the inside of your home. Outside is work, traffic, noise, deadlines, stress. Inside is where those things are meant to stay behind. That's why many Japanese families treat the Genkan almost like a filter. Shoes are lined up, bags are emptied, mail is sorted immediately. Nothing unnecessary crosses deeper into the house. The habit only takes a minute or two, but it prevents dozens of tiny messes from spreading into every room, because clutter almost always expands. Unless something stops it, and in many Japanese homes, that something is the front door. A calm home doesn't begin in the living room, it begins at the front door. Make good habits automatic. There's a reason so many organizing systems work for a week and then quietly fall apart. It's not because people stop caring, and it's usually not because they're lazy. It's because they're relying on something that was never meant to carry the entire weight of a habit: discipline. Discipline is useful, but it's also limited. Some days you have plenty of it. Other days you're tired, distracted, or simply trying to get through life. The homes that stay consistently organized aren't depending on motivation every single day. They're designed so that the easiest choice is usually the right one. That's another lesson many Japanese homes quietly teach. Instead of trying to become more disciplined, they make everyday habits almost automatic. Let's look at 4 simple systems that do exactly that. 5. The 5-minute night reset. Think about how a small neighborhood store closes each evening. The shelves are straightened, the floor is swept, everything is put back where it belongs. Not because someone expects a customer 5 minutes later, but because tomorrow starts much better when today ends well. Many Japanese families treat their homes the same way. Before going to bed, they spend just 5 minutes resetting the house. Cups go back to the kitchen. Blankets are folded. Shoes return to the entryway. The dining table becomes clear again. It isn't really cleaning. It's a closing ritual, a quiet signal that the day is complete. The magic isn't in the 5 minutes themselves. It's in what those 5 minutes prevent. Without a nightly reset, one day's mess quietly becomes tomorrow's starting point. Then tomorrow's becomes the next day's, until a simple task turns into an overwhelming weekend project. But when every evening ends with a small reset, every morning begins with a sense of order. Your home greets you instead of reminding you what still needs to be done, because, just like a well-run store, a peaceful home should never have to reopen in yesterday's chaos. 6. Everything has one home. Have you ever noticed that certain things always seem to disappear? The scissors, the TV remote, your favorite pen? Eventually they show up, usually somewhere completely unexpected. Most people assume they're simply forgetful. But often, that's not the real problem. The real problem is that the object never had a permanent home in the first place. Many Japanese households follow one remarkably simple rule. Every object belongs somewhere, and only one place, not two. Not wherever there's room, just one. What's interesting is that this isn't really about organization. It's about behavior. People naturally put things where it's easiest. If putting something away requires opening 3 cabinets and moving 2 boxes, most of us simply won't do it. Not because we're careless, because the system is asking for too much effort. A good system works with human nature, not against it. So if the same objects keep ending up in the wrong place, don't blame yourself. Ask a different question. Has your home made the right place the easiest place? Sometimes the problem isn't the person, it's the system. 7. Look up before you spread out. When most homes run out of storage, people look outward. Another basket, another box, another pile on the floor. Japanese homes often have far less space to work with. So instead of expanding across the room, they expand upward. Walls become storage. Doors become storage. Corners become storage. The floor stays open. That simple shift changes more than appearance. It changes how a room feels. Open floor space immediately creates a sense of calm, even when the room contains exactly the same number of belongings. But there's an important balance here. Vertical storage should help your home breathe, not become permission to keep buying more things. More shelves shouldn't mean more clutter. They should simply give your existing belongings a better place to live. The goal isn't to fit more into your home. The goal is to let your home feel lighter. 8. Fold so you can see everything. Open a typical dresser drawer, and you'll often find stacks. To reach the shirt at the bottom, you disturb everything above it. After a few mornings, the drawer looks messy again. Many Japanese households use a different approach. Instead of stacking clothes, they fold them upright, so every item can be seen from above. At first, it might seem like a small difference, but psychologically, it's a powerful one. There's a simple reason. What we can't see, we tend to forget. The sweater buried at the bottom of a pile slowly disappears from memory. Months later, We buy another one because we forgot we already owned something similar. Visibility changes behavior. When you can see everything you own at a glance, you appreciate it more. You wear it more, and surprisingly, you often buy less. Sometimes organization isn't about creating more space. It's about making your existing life easier to see. Reduce visual noise. By now, you might be noticing a pattern. None of these habits are really about becoming a better cleaner. They're about making everyday life feel lighter, because clutter doesn't only fill a room, it fills your attention. We often think of a messy home as a visual problem, but in reality, it's also a mental one. Every object your eyes land on is something your brain has to process, even if only for a fraction of a second. Most of that happens without you even realizing it. The more unfinished signals your environment sends, the harder your mind has to work just to relax. That's why some rooms instantly make you feel calm, while others leave you feeling strangely restless. The difference isn't always how much is in the room. It's how much your brain is being asked to manage. Let's look at 3 Japanese habits that quietly reduce that invisible mental load. 9. Rotate your home with the seasons. Walk into many homes, and you'll find something interesting. Winter coats hanging in July. Beach towels taking up space in January. Holiday decorations tucked into the back of a closet but still competing for valuable storage. We often give every possession a permanent place. Even when our lives are constantly changing, many Japanese households take a different approach. Instead of organizing everything at once, they organize around the season they're actually living in. Off-season clothing is stored away. Summer items make room for winter. Winter gives way to spring. The home quietly changes along with everyday life. But here's the part that's easy to overlook. Every seasonal change becomes a natural opportunity to pause. Before storing something away, ask yourself a few simple questions. Did I actually use this? Does it still fit my life? Does it need to be repaired? Or is it finally time to let someone else use it? That means decluttering happens naturally throughout the year, instead of becoming one exhausting event, because today's life deserves today's space, not yesterday's. 10. Keep your surfaces clear. Think about the difference between walking into 2 kitchens. Both are perfectly clean. Neither has crumbs. Neither has dirty dishes. But one countertop is covered with appliances, unopened mail, grocery bags, water bottles, and random little things. The other has almost nothing on it. Which one feels calmer? Most people answer without hesitation. What's interesting is that this isn't just personal preference. Your brain is constantly scanning the environment around you. The more objects competing for your attention, the more information your brain has to quietly organize in the background. Researchers often describe this as cognitive load. Even when nothing is physically dirty, visual clutter still asks your brain to keep processing. That's why a clear countertop often feels cleaner than one that's technically spotless but visually crowded. Many Japanese kitchens follow a remarkably simple habit. Once something has been used, it goes back where it belongs. Not tomorrow, not later, immediately. The goal isn't to own less. It's to leave your surfaces free for whatever comes next. Because an empty surface isn't wasted space. It's a space that's ready to be lived in. 11. Never let paper become tomorrow's problem. Paper has a strange way of multiplying. One receipt becomes 5. One unopened envelope becomes a stack. Before long, an entire corner of the kitchen has quietly turned into an office. The reason paper becomes overwhelming isn't because there's so much of it. It's because every sheet represents another unfinished decision. Many Japanese households deal with paper before it ever has the chance to settle. The moment it enters the home, It belongs in one of only four places: trash, action, archive, or digital. That's it. Notice what's missing. There's no pile called "I'll deal with it later," because later has a habit of becoming next week, then next month, and eventually to never. The fewer unfinished decisions sitting around your home, the quieter your mind becomes. Sometimes the best way to organize paper is simply to refuse to postpone the decision. Transition to part cat. By now, you may have noticed something surprising. None of these habits are really about creating the perfect home. They're about creating a home that asks less from you, less attention, less effort, less stress. And that leads us to one final lesson. The most peaceful homes aren't always the ones with the fewest belongings. They're the ones that have been thoughtfully designed to support the people living inside them. Let's look at the final four habits. By now, you may have noticed something surprising. None of these Japanese habits are really about chasing perfection. They're about creating a home that asks less from you, less effort, less attention, less stress. Because a well-designed home shouldn't constantly remind you of unfinished work. It should quietly support the life you're trying to live. That's one of the biggest differences between simply organizing a house and intentionally designing one. Let's finish with 4 habits that focus less on cleaning and more on creating a sense of calm that lasts. 12. The 10-minute sprint. One of the biggest mistakes people make is waiting until they have an entire afternoon to organize. Unfortunately, that afternoon rarely comes. Life gets busy, energy disappears, and the mess keeps growing. Many Japanese households take a much gentler approach. Instead of waiting for the perfect time, they set aside just 10 minutes, not to finish everything, just to make one small area better than it was before. A single drawer, one shelf, the kitchen counter. That's enough. Because progress has a strange effect on the human mind. Once you begin moving, it's often easier to keep going. Psychologists have observed this for years. Motivation doesn't always come before action. More often, action creates motivation. A small success builds confidence. Confidence creates momentum. Momentum makes the next small step feel easier. So instead of asking yourself to organize the whole house, just improve one corner. Tomorrow, improve another. Peace is usually built one small victory at a time. 13. The simplicity of furoshiki. There's an old Japanese tradition called furoshiki. At first glance, it's simply a square piece of cloth. But over the centuries, it has carried groceries, wrapped gifts, protected books, held clothing, and even become a picnic bag. One object, dozens of purposes. That idea reflects something much larger in Japanese living. Instead of filling a home with a different tool for every possible situation, many people choose objects that can adapt as life changes. Versatility often replaces excess. It's a quiet reminder that simplicity isn't always about owning less. Sometimes it's about expecting more from what you already own. A flexible object often creates a more flexible home, and a more flexible home usually creates a calmer life. 14. Leave space for nothing. Perhaps the most beautiful lesson in Japanese design isn't about what you place inside a room. It's about what you intentionally leave out. In Japan, there's a concept called ma. It's often translated as empty space, but that translation doesn't fully capture its meaning. Ma isn't emptiness, it's breathing room. Think about your favorite piece of music. Without pauses, it becomes noise. Think about a painting. Without blank space, your eyes never know where to rest. Even conversations need silence. Without moments of quiet, words lose their meaning. Our homes are no different. Every empty shelf, every open corner, every clear tabletop gives your eyes and your mind a place to breathe. Many of us feel guilty when we see unused space. We immediately think something should fill it. Another decoration, another chair, another storage basket. But Japanese design gently suggests the opposite. Sometimes empty space isn't something missing. Sometimes it's the very thing that makes everything else feel peaceful. Not every corner needs a purpose. Sometimes its purpose is simply to give your life room to breathe. 15. The weekly reset. Even the most organized homes slowly drift out of balance. That's normal. Life happens, guests visit, schedules change, children play, laundry piles up. The goal was never to stop life from happening. The goal is simply to make returning to order easy. Many Japanese families set aside a short time once a week to quietly walk through the home, not searching for perfection, searching for patterns. Instead of asking, "What should I clean?" they ask something much more useful. What system stopped working this week? Did shoes pile up by the door? Maybe the shoe rack is too small. Did mail cover the kitchen table again? Maybe there's no convenient place to sort it. Did clothes collect on a chair? Maybe the laundry routine needs adjusting. Notice the difference. The problem isn't automatically you. The problem might simply be the environment asking too much from you. That's a powerful shift, because when you stop blaming yourself, you start improving the systems around you, and over time, those systems quietly begin taking care of you. Japanese homes aren't peaceful because the people who live in them clean more than everyone else. They're peaceful because they've removed hundreds of tiny decisions before those decisions ever become stress. Every object has a purpose. Every habit has a place. Every room supports the life happening inside it. And maybe that's the real lesson. A calm home isn't one that's perfectly organized. It's one that leaves enough space for you to feel organized too. So this week, don't try to transform your entire house. Choose just one small habit, one shelf, one drawer, one simple system, because lasting change rarely begins with a dramatic makeover. It begins with one quiet decision, repeated often enough to become the way you live. Thank you for watching, and if today's ideas inspired you, I'd love to hear which Japanese habit you'll try first. Until next time, take care, and may your home become a place that gives you peace, not just a place where you keep your things.